So, we talk about elephants in the room, right? No. This is even, we're beyond elephants here. There are some subjects that we, in the process of doing our plan, we said, okay, we might get to it, and then we might get to it, and didn't get in there. So these are some things that are going to happen. I'm seeing it, you know, as a planner, as a long-range person, we're going to be doing these things are coming up. But maybe the next time around, we'll try to get to them. So how do we go to the next slide? Oh, I can run it.
I think you just have to
do the right arrow thing.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
We're down.
Down arrow. Okay.
There you go.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
You want me to do this one?
You want me? Sure. Thanks, okay. All right. So here's some of the things that didn't make it in our plan. Oh, autonomous vehicles. Have you heard about those lately? Yesterday, there was a session where we got into that whole discussion about autonomous vehicles. Anybody had the, again, survey, anybody had the pleasure of actually riding in one yet? Okay.
I have.
Oh, okay, so on our heads. So maybe when you talk about it, you can tell us how that went. So what's that going to mean to it for us, by the way? I'm the teacher guy here. I don't just lecture. So autonomous vehicles, is that going to be a game changer for us? Yeah. Yeah. Not just in the transportation realm, but how about our economy? How's it going to deal with it? How about jobs? Always the one that everybody's talking about. What's going to happen to the jobs? We're going to lose a bunch.
Yeah.
We are. Any idea of what sectors are going to be hit hard?
Delivery.
Yeah, truck drivers, or any vehicle drivers of all kinds going to be replaced. So it's something we don't want to just blow off. It's really important. And anybody that's in fact, like Uber, right, is doing the autonomous vehicles right now, so they want to do it rather than have drivers. So, and did you hear that somebody died in an autonomous vehicle recently? You heard about that one? Yeah. So they're not there yet, but it'll be here soon. So coming soon to a roadway near you. Okay. Oh, that other thing. How that just came up. Oh, we're talking about recent events here or what here? Okay, the stadium. Okay, we didn't bring that up in our plan at this point because we didn't know what was going to happen to it. It kind of just popped up out of nowhere, at the last minute for us. Well, it looks like we're going to get one. So anyway, there's that. Monorail, or what else? Connections between the airport and our strip, and what's it? Oh, the stadium. Yeah, how's that going to work? So those are things that we did not talk about in our plan, but we're going to be doing it, I'm sure. Speaking of the monorail, anybody rode on the monorail? Okay, we got a few of you that did that. Okay, good, because I had a hand in doing that, but sometimes I try not to tell anybody I did. It was, if we could have run it right down the strip, that would have been great, right? That would have been a great thing to do, but no, they had to put it right in the back of everything so nobody knows where it's at hardly. But however, let me say this. I mean, my understanding is the stats are good for them. They've had good ridership. So that's good.
It's picked up since they opened.
All right, so it's working. I think it's actually going to work finally. What did it take? Like more than 10 years for it to finally start making sense. And what else would be good to do with the monorail? Airport, right? Take it to the airport. That's going to be a big one. Okay. So it's going to be great things coming. And then, of course, these things are the 3 aliens that I was talking about, and then what's the impacts of that related to land use. That's what we're talking about. So, yeah, that's it. Okay, yeah. Thanks, Ryan. Okay, so there it is in all its glory. Here's the link. It's, we did it. It's adopted. It's all good. But like I said, we're not done yet. And we're never done, right? That's how planning works, right? We're always looking to the next one, next time that we get it done. Okay, yes. Now yesterday we showed I'm losing track of things here too. So yesterday we had the map of Washoe, right? And their transportation network. And as you can see, we have a spaghetti bowl and we have spaghetti that flows out of it, right? So it's, there's a lot there, and yet we're not done yet, right? We're going to hear later in this session about I-11, right? And for those of you that went out to Boulder City, you saw it under construction. So it's actually happening too. So that's happening out there, US 93 area. other forms of transportation. We have rail shown on there. Other things that are coming, you know, we are talking about, or not talking, we're working in the planning stage. We are actually working on Maryland Parkway. So things are looking good there to get that thing going. Using transit. And as we all know, transit has been hard up till now, I think, for people to accept. However, we know about the generational thing, right? Millennials like transit, right? Overall, in general. So I think we have a good shot at that as well, getting that to work and be successful. Anything else up there of interest? Oh, yeah, New Jersey, right? You all know that. That's New Jersey, sort of. You change the shape of it area-wise. So there's a lot, it's spread out. We're spread out. So the geography is big to me because that's my thing. Okay, enough of that. Okay, so here's a rundown of everything we did in the plan. I just thought I'd throw that up there because why not? It's pretty standard. It's pretty, you know, somebody told me earlier, what did they do? Herd cats. Yeah, it took some cat herding to get this thing to go through. So that's what's involved. So, you know, it's kind of standard stock stuff. You know, our background information, what we have already, what are our challenges? Yeah, we have challenges, of course. Some solutions. We try to come up with some that you know, would make sense. And then, oh, yes, the thing about land use patterns, that is really key. Again, we want to try to tie in transportation and land use. You know, that makes some sense. And then we have a bunch of goals and policies. So, you know, we wanted to try to make those realistic in what we did. One thing we don't have in here that was in the last plan was a work plan. Why would we not want a work plan in our plan? Oh, because we want to have it over here and actually doing it. Okay, so that goes about it together. And then other fun things that NRS requires, like addressing. You have to deal with addressing in this element. And then maps and so on. So, you know, we did some work on it. And brought it up to date. Oh, when was the last time that we did it? 2003? We won't do that again, right? Not going to wait that long for next time. Better not. Okay, thanks. And this is just an example of a small snippet of some goals and policies. And what do we talk about here? Oh yeah, I-11 Project Neon. So at least we got that in their plan, because we know that's coming. And then, you know, just a bunch of other planeries, of course, that we deal with. Maryland Parkway's up there. We talked about that. The BRT and light rail. See, this is a new thing for us, BRT and light rail. So at least we're kind of bringing ourselves up to a little bit of date. What else? Being interconnected, all good. We'll get to questions in just a minute. I can tell you're all ready for those. All right, and I think I have one more. Oh, what do we have here? Anybody know what this is? Hyperloop, yes. Yeah. So that's alien number 4. All right, so that's the other one that may pop up on our, well, one of these plans we do. So that's a game changer, right? If they can make it work and work like they say it will. What's that? I heard a comment. What is that?
Because the pipeline.
Pipeline, yeah. You can use, yeah. Well, it looks like one, doesn't it? Looks like a Alaska pipeline, kind of on the stilts. All right. Okay, that's all I have. What about you? Have any questions or thoughts at this point about what we're doing? Okay, yes, Polly.
Why would you do a Hyperloop instead of a maglev?
Oh, yeah. You need to, I couldn't find a picture of one last night when I was working on this. Yes, maglev is in there too. Yes, I think that kind of.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they're not the same thing, of course, but
no.
That's the idea. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. Good point, Robert.
Did you mention high-speed rail connection to California or in your plan?
Remember? You did not. No, you know what? I think I did. I'd have to go back and look at it.
The trick is with that is right away.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge for sure. So, I mean, you have a lot of government plan, which hopefully they'll work with us. Let us have some right away.
There's a couple of patches that one is, I forget, protected land that comes all the way to the right of way over NDOT. And so that's not likely to be released.
You guys won't let us have any land for it?
It's not ours.
Oh, okay, so we're
And there's Cajon Pass.
So, but there's that.
There's Cajon Pass.
Yeah, Cajon Pass. Oh, wait a minute, wildfires?
Well, we met with Forest Service.
Yeah.
And the bottom line was essentially, in what century were you hoping to get this permit?
Right, so there's that. But, I mean, but that is a valid concern about, I mean, obviously we know there's hazards that you'd have to go through to run that anyway.
Yeah.
So, but yes, that's, okay, yes.
Just, I was glad to see you mention autonomous vehicles at the beginning there, but
Oh, yeah.
there's a lot of other implications to that, and personally, I think autonomous vehicles are going to replace what we think of as mass transit, which would be, you know, so is it wise to invest in buses and monorails and things like that at this point, where they may be replaced by the technology within 10 years?
That's a good point. Yeah, and I'm just trying to think of particular situations. The Strip, you know, with autonomous vehicles that are going to have the same, similar issues as regular vehicles right now, they get jammed up in there. So I think there's going to be still a place for mass transit, I think, in some of that, in the mix. Oh, okay. Raymond's, oh yeah, Raymond. Oh, Raymond's got careful. That's danger. Okay, Raymond's back there. Okay, all right.
Right, autonomous driving buses have been things that have been on the drawing board since the Germans started doing them in 1959. Technology so far has eluded them. But I think we're at a point now where, yes, you could have autonomous mass transit. The problem with not having any mass transit and just relying on pods or whatever to drive themselves is they take up a whale of a lot of room, even when they're fairly small little pods. So I think that there's a place for mass transit, and it'll probably look fairly familiar. It just may not have a familiar face on board behind the wheel.
So I was at a conference last week, the ICSO conference, mentioned it yesterday, which is a lot of traffic engineers and tech side, and that was a big part of the conversation. And there are countries that are, so the Netherlands is already using an autonomous shuttle. It's smaller than a typical bus, but it's sort of first mile, last mile type solution in small communities. But a lot of the conversation centered around between autonomy, connected vehicles, and the sharing economy, that the way we look at mobility is going to change completely. There's, with the younger generation, really looking for mobility as a service. So we might get towards fewer people owning their own car, and you purchase sort of service plans, and that might include mass transit as well as personal autonomous vehicles. But this idea of sharing that mobility is something that's seems to be going along with that connectivity and that autonomy. So I have a little bit of hope.
We segueing into your talk now?
Sure, I just thought I'd add it.
No, that's good. I like it.
Spent a week talking about this last week.
Okay. You had something else?
I work with the RTC as a transit planner.
Sure.
I think mass transit, enhancing it, is the best ideal thing to do. But there are different players involved here. You know, the private side, like the taxi, Uber, and all the private bus companies around, especially specifically in Vegas. So those, if we enhance the mass transit, those players will be affected. And politically, I think they have kind of influence on these kind of decisions.
I'm glad you said that. That's good. Yeah, you're right there. That's pretty good.
I think that's true, and I think that's also the importance of an organization like APA. I know we talked yesterday about what's the role and should there be some additional advocacy, and making sure sort of smart planning is part of those conversations. You know, Garrett and I can't go against the taxi lobby of the legislature, but you know, professional organizations maybe can help us out with that, and just saying, hey, there's implications here. There's sustainability implications. And also when groups come together like Southern Nevada Strong and set a vision for the region, there's sort of power in numbers. So it's not any one agency saying, hey, we want mass transit. It's, look, the region as a whole has accepted these goals, and here's what we need to get there. I try and take the positive and hope that.
That's what we do as planners. I always say I like to look for little victories along the way, wherever we get.
Not that I have anything against the taxi lobby or anyone else, but we need to make sure we're looking at the sort of greater good goals and not just individual interests.
Over time, those things, those pressures will happen. Yeah. We got another,
Speaking of aliens,
yeah, right.
with this technology, my Dodge Turbo Cummins diesel that pulls my toy hauler, how does it fit into this equation? I still want to go up into the mountains. I still want to do something outside of the city. how does this, can I drive my truck in the city? How does the existing, what we have now, how does it fit in with what they're looking at doing in the future?
So what I've heard is that it's going to be a gradual transition. Nobody's going to stop anyone from doing what they're doing today. There's just going to be additional options coming up in the future. So, I mean, I think everyone in the field has accepted, it's easy once all the vehicles are connected and autonomous, right? It's easy to plan that system. But what's going to happen is there's a lot of people that own their own cars. There's probably always going to be someone who has that, 1950s Corvette,
Right.
that, might not even meet any of our current safety standards, much less be connected and autonomous. So we have to plan for a future that has a bigger variety of vehicles and mobility choices than we have today.
Hybrid system, maybe?
Makes it
Of
interesting.
some kind?
Yeah.
I think we had a question
I
here.
was just curious if the plan addressed rail and transportation
Yes.
infrastructure for APEX.
Apex. We talked about it. Yeah, we did talk about it a bit, but really, again, we don't want to steal thunder from North Las Vegas because that's a lot of what they do. So yeah, we did kind of an overall brief discussion of it. Right.
There was a thought when Uber and Lyft started out, because the taxi industry is no good at suburban transportation. And the thought was Uber and Lyft could fill in that blank. Are they doing that? Is that working?
Yeah. Well, at least from a practical perspective, I can tell you, I can actually get transportation now in the outlying
As
areas.
opposed to what you couldn't get before, yeah.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, so there's that.
What's interesting is a lot of the players in the transportation world are changing. So at this conference I was at last week, IBM was there, MasterCard was there. MasterCard had actually a big role. They held a hackathon the weekend before with groups of young, engineers and programmers figuring out different payment systems for a variety of transportation choices. So it's no longer, you talk about jobs changing. What's going to happen to traditional civil engineers? I think we're still going to need them, but are we going to need as many?
Right.
And are we going to need more sort of system programmers, financial people working with tech people to figure out payment systems so I can have one card or use my phone to use any transport system in the world. So our roles as planners and engineers, I think, are changing dramatically. And so that's what worries me as a state employee is, we talked yesterday about having 1950s style funding, but also organizational structures. And it's difficult in public agencies to kind of change those organizational structures. We have a governor who talks about the new Nevada, but we have an old state organization. So how to start changing not only how we're organized, but the types of positions we hire for. We are seeing an increase in IT positions in NDOT, but I think it needs to be even more dramatic than what we're seeing now. So
I'm going to sit down and let you go from here.
Okay. Of course, I took notes on the things like Garrett in terms of what I don't have in here, but we're hoping to address. Now, it's much easier at the beginning of a planning process to say, we're going to do all of these things. And poor Brian Gant in the audience here, who's our consultant PM, who I keep throwing more at. Oh, and we have to do this. Oh, and we have to do this. So I'm very excited about the future of transportation. I might need to pull back a little bit in terms of what's realistic for this round of this plan, knowing that we're going to have to be updating it. It's going to be a continuously updating process. So, and that's statewide long-range transportation plan. We scratched out update because this is not an update of anything we've had before. This is a brand new process, a brand new plan. It's our opportunity to reinvigorate transportation planning in the state. So just a little bit about NDOT for those of you who don't know. And in fact, sometimes I think folks in my own agency miss that planning part. But in the NRS, we are actually responsible for planning, construction, operation, and maintenance of 5,400 miles of highway, 1,100 bridges. So, we're responsible for the whole state. And while most of the population lives in the urbanized areas and they have their MPOs, we have to make sure you know, the roads throughout the state are operating in a safe manner. We're also responsible for the integrated transportation system, which includes all of these other modes. So we have, it gets a little tricky because we have the responsibility to plan for all modes. We are a transportation department, not a highways department. However, that's in one part of the statute. In the part of the statute about the funding we receive, it's all about the roads. So we have these unfunded mandates, if you will. So we have this responsibility to plan for all modes. We don't have any money to do anything about some of these modes. So that's a conversation we're hoping to get started and continue through this planning process, and hopefully you all can help us with that. So a little background. So all DOTs are required to do long-range transportation plans, just like MPOs have to do their RTPs. It has to be a 20-year planning document, same as the MPOs. However, in the past, and the requirements still aren't quite the same. It falls short, the current regulation still falls short of requiring a 20-year fiscally constrained list of projects like the MPOs have to do. However, there are implications that we're going that way, and that's in MAP 21 and FAST Act, the last two transportation authorization bills, now require a performance-based long-range plan, which kind of hints that you're actually going to have to start planning for projects beyond that 4-year STIP process. So we feel like it's an opportunity to reinvent NDOT planning. So when I started at NDOT 8 years ago, planning was, the rest of the department knew planning as where you have to go to make sure your project is in the STIP. And for those of you who don't know what the STIP is, Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, it's the 4-year federally required fiscally constrained list of projects. So planning was at the end of the process rather than the beginning. You know, the engineers were driving the process and still do in some cases, but we didn't really do planning. We did this policy document, and then we made sure projects were funded in the STIP. And so we're starting to change that conversation. I hope with this effort, it becomes a more robust, comprehensive, coordinated process. You know, I have high hopes, but baby steps. So it's an opportunity to align project planning with statewide goals. The governor's office came out with a state plan recently, a strategic plan recently, again, talking about that new Nevada. So it gives us an opportunity to kind of back up and say, okay, what are we doing in our transportation processes to align with the governor's vision for the new Nevada? Formalized project planning and prioritization. It's very frustrating to me when either internally or externally I hear the question, where do projects come from? And I hate to admit we don't have a consistent answer for that. They come from lots of places. They come from you know, legislative actions like we had last week, and we've had a few times in the last couple of years. They come from, a lot of them do come from true needs on the transportation system. We know there's congested areas. We have an idea of what the fix is, and we just go along and do it. But in terms of what, you know, the state input, the public input in terms of what are our priorities, we don't really have a good strategic plan in terms of here are our goals, here's our vision, here's what we're using to prioritize those projects. It just comes in from the various divisions, from various needs, whether it be you know, engineering, planning, political, but we don't have a defensible process at this point in time, but we're working on developing that as part of this. This is an opportunity to coordinate. One, we're working better than we ever have, I think, with our MPOs, you know, the RTCs, in terms of coordinating our planning activities. We view this as an opportunity to create this unified plan, to use a term from Utah, where there's one transportation plan for the state. And so we're going to pull in the MPOs, RTPs. We're going to look at some of the local master plans. I don't know that that'll be fully integrated with this round, but also all of our modal plans. So NDOT produces a bike ped plan, a statewide rail plan, a statewide freight plan. So to kind of integrate all of that either by reference or actually in the document to say, here's the transportation plan for the state. So there's one plan, one vision, one voice. I might have gotten ahead of myself a little bit there. So currently, NDOT leadership is going through a process to update our strategic plan. We're working on vision, mission, goals. We actually have a workshop later this week to kind of finalize those new mission, vision, goals and start talking about what's the strategy for the department. This plan is going to be based on those mission, vision, goals and create a plan, mission, vision, goals based on the department ones, which are based on the governor's state plan. So it all, you know, it all flows nicely up and down. More opportunities. You know, we talked about understanding project decisions and creating a performance-based process. So NDOT currently is responsible for 4 different sets of performance measures. We have our legislative report that we put together in a nice little packet every 2 years for the legislature, our performance management report. We have additional legislative budget measures, which I didn't even realize till we started putting together these spreadsheets of all these different measures that are sometimes overlapping with our overall legislative report, but there's additional ones. FHWA stewardships, we have an agreement with Federal Highway Administration in terms of what we're responsible for and reporting certain measures to them. And now with MAP 21 and the FAST Act, there's additional measures. So what we've done, and then you know some divisions have their own measures as well. What we've done is worked very closely with the MPOs, made a giant list of all of those performance measures that NDOT and the MPOs are reporting, and kind of start whittling it down to what are the measures that are consistent, that are needed to meet MAP 21 compliance, and that are important for planning. So we started with this giant spreadsheet, we've narrowed it down, I can't remember how many we have right now, and we're starting to measure consistent data across the 5 agencies. Yeah.
Could you give me a couple of examples of performance measures that you're referring to? Perhaps as you coordinate with an MPO?
So a good example, because it's one of the first ones that the feds have kind of settled on with the new processes, is safety. So number of fatalities and fatality rate, number of serious injuries. So that's one example. We're working on, nationally, there's a big effort for some sort of measure of reliability. So we're going away from the old measures like level of service and those types of congestion measures, because it varies so much from place to place what's an acceptable measure of congestion. So we're looking at reliability measures, so that's going to be kind of a new national standard.
What does reliability mean as opposed to congestion?
So if, rather than compare your travel time to like free flow speeds, compares your travel time from day to day. So if your commute is usually 20 minutes, but some days it's 20 minutes and some days it's an hour, and so you always have to leave home an hour before you have to get to work, with knowing that half the time you're going to be there 40 minutes early, that's not reliable. So it's giving people some confidence in terms of, you know, how sure am I that my 30-minute commute is going to be 30 minutes? So there's a lot more data available these days that we're collecting, that we have access to, that we can purchase. The amount of data is just incredible and increasing exponentially just in the world in general. So we have a lot more data that we can use for those types of measures. The challenge is figuring out how to turn data into useful information. So that was another big topic of the conference I was at last week. You know, this conversation of big data. So there's a lot of information. You know, anyone who has a cell phone, your information is being tracked and is being used for these useful tools in terms of how long does it take you to get to work or to travel along certain segments of the road. So and this is part of the where do projects come from. We have all of these tools at the department that are used for various different purposes. So we have, I don't know, 4 or 5 different project lists. It's one of my big frustrations. I'd like us to get down to one. So we're working with Rogers to help develop a tool where we can, without undermining what any of the divisions are doing in terms of their prioritization, find a way to say, okay, here are the tools we're going to use based on our mission, vision, goals, and our performance data to kind of prioritize projects and create, ideally, one list. In the planning world, our official list is what's in the STIM, because that's what's approved by the feds, that's what's out to the public. The 5-year plan is something that's used internally. Decision Lens is a software tool we're evaluating right now. That could be the solution or it could be something else. So we're evaluating not just the tools we have available, the tools that the consultant team is aware of, and also what other states are using for this challenge. So I talked about, coordinating the vision for the whole state. We have 4 MPOs, and I've been talking to other states. We're pretty lucky we only have 4. And so they're all in the process of updating their RTPs. Carson just finished theirs. Utah was next. Washoe Clark to follow soon. So we're working on integrating not just the projects, but kind of those visions for the different areas into one unified plan. So the process, establish goals and objectives, analyzing existing conditions, needs analysis, transportation priorities. But throughout that, we've talked about autonomous vehicles and new technologies and new forms of transportation. So the big challenge is developing a process that's defensible and performance-driven, but's flexible enough so that as these new technologies and new forms of mobility evolve, we can evolve with it. So that's a pretty big challenge, and I'm not sure we'll get 100% there with this one, but we want to keep that in mind, that we're planning for the system we have today, but we need to make sure that that system might not be what we have tomorrow or in the future. So this is our process for the plan. So we're currently working on public outreach, branding, in-reach. I felt it was very important that as we develop this statewide plan, we do okay, and that does okay with outreach. What we haven't been very good at is in-reach, making sure that this isn't just a planning document, that it's a department process. So, engineering, maintenance, districts, hopefully all will buy into this new robust process. I say hopefully, but it'll happen. So it's about a 1.5-year-ish process, where we're in phase 1 right now. We really just got started. Then we'll start looking at the trends, and we'll start actually building the plan for the future. I don't want to get into I elaborated a lot, I think, at the beginning, so I don't want to, there's a lot more slides here in terms of our outreach process. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly, but again, feel free to answer questions. So, we're in the process of gathering data. The consulting team has reached out to selected individuals throughout the department, mostly division heads, but also others that have either a process that they're managing or a certain piece of this process that they felt is critical. So I know it's been a time-consuming, grueling process for them, but I think it's really helpful because if we don't know what we're doing within the department, we can't improve that process. So that's been a big effort so far. We're working on different strategies to reach as many people throughout the state as possible. So we're going to be developing survey instruments. We are going to get out there in person as well, but it's very challenging when you're trying to do a statewide plan and reach, areas like Ely, where if you just set up a public meeting for a statewide long-range plan, it doesn't really draw a lot of people. So we're working on in a future slide, you'll see we're kind of identifying those community events that do gather people and seeing if we can have some representation at some of those. So again, I got ahead of myself. But the idea is to really educate the public in terms of who makes the decisions. We don't want to falsely tell everyone, you're going to make the decision for the department. There are, we have a board chaired by the governor. They make the decisions. But we want to make sure we let people, agencies, and the public know there is a process for input and how that input will be considered and the opportunities for that participation. We do have a set of committees And we decided to use the committees that we already have in place with some adaptation. So rather than create more meetings that people have to go to, kind of make some of those meetings we have maybe a little bit more meaningful. So the Statewide Transportation Technical Advisory Committee, which has, I'll be honest, lost its way a little bit in the last couple of years, trying to give them a more valuable role in terms of really advising and guiding the department as a steering committee for this plan. The PEG is the Planning Executive Group. That is NDOT, Federal Highways, and all of the MPOs, kind of planning director level, where we meet and talk about how to integrate these plans, the consistent performance measures, those types of activities. So use them as the technical team. They're the ones that know the rules and regulations and performance measures and those types of things. And then we're going to set up a group of focus groups and again, get public input as well. We talked about this a little bit. So there's a list of some of the community events we've talked about, seeing if we can target. We may not be able to get to all of them, but looking for opportunities to piggyback on events that are already occurring rather than spend a bunch of time and money to hold a specific public meeting that we know won't draw a lot of people. We still will do those in the major metropolitan areas. Take advantage of NDOT county tours. So we go to each county every year and talk about our work program for that year. Use that as another opportunity to talk about not just the plan for this year, but what this process is that we're building. Focus groups on things like land use, economic development, tourism. We're working on, we don't have a website yet, but we're working on developing a website using existing NDOT social media so that there's not some confusion about where we go and drawing in a broader audience. And we're working on project branding, which I'm kind of excited about. So what we're currently calling it, or working on branding for it, is the One Nevada Transportation Plan. So that brings in that concept of one place to go for transportation for the state. I think they're in the process of, do we have that URL yet? Is that ours? One Nevada Plan, or One ND Plan, hashtag, tagline, One Vision, One Plan, One Nevada. So really kind of excessively putting out that idea of we want to be a comprehensive, unified approach to planning for transportation for the state. And that's our current logo. I think we're seeing if that's the right one. We're looking at some options, but I like it because it shows the whole state. It shows the different modes. Go back for a second. So I was just noting when Garrett was talking that he mentioned that I was going to talk about I-11, which I didn't.
Brian has something about it.
Oh, you're talking about it. Yeah. But so Brian's going to talk about the current project, which is under construction right now. As part of this plan, we want to do some focused planning on some of our major corridors. So I-11 through the rest of the state is going to be a big focus on that as well, identifying kind of the different segments and what the next process is to go forward. So there's sections that we can probably start expanding now. There's sections that are going to require a lot more, route alternatives and that type of work. So kind of separating out the different phases for different parts of it to keep it moving.
Stand this mic for a second. I just want to mention one thing I forgot to say when I talked is that that is something we have done much more this time than last time was multimodal. So we're pushing for the PED stuff going in there. So I was glad to see a lot of that put in our plan that we didn't have before. So anyway, that's.
So what else did I note that I didn't have in the slide? So we talked a lot about new technology and new forms of transportation. I'm glad you showed Hyperloop. We're actually working with the Governor's Office of Economic Development and RTC of Southern Nevada to submit a Hyperloop 1 Global Challenge application. So Hyperloop has turned the tables. They've had trouble getting federal grants because it's a new mode, right? So they don't fit under federal highways, federal railroad. It's something totally new. So they've actually flipped the script and said, all right, we want you to apply to us. And so we're putting the case out there that Nevada is a great place to build the future of transportation. We have a fairly, compared to our neighbors to the west, flexible regulatory framework, and we have the space. I mean, there's a big interest in I-15 from the ports to Las Vegas, but as Polly, as you mentioned, the right-of-way there is a huge challenge. So we're looking at the opportunity for the I-11 corridor, loosely US 95, where I wouldn't say it's easy, but compared to a corridor like I-15, there's an opportunity there for right-of-way, and an area that's less populated. There's probably less concern about anything going wrong, although they have some pretty smart engineers working on that. So it's really exciting to work in a state that's not afraid to kind of look at these new technologies, whether it's autonomy or Hyperloop or whatever the case may be. So, Coy?
Yeah, and that brings up a point. I mean, those are all traditional modes right there. I mean, there's no automobile, but I'm assuming the roads reflect that. But I don't see anything about innovation. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah, and it wasn't covered in the presentation, but that's certainly something we've been talking a lot about in terms of,
Especially the tip of the spear.
yeah, seeing it goes up, but it is something, like I said, you know, the governor keeps saying, with New Nevada, he has set up the Center for Advanced Mobility, so through the Governor's Office of Economic Development, so it's all driven by how do we bring businesses here, but transportation is a huge role in that. So sometimes we get put in a little bit of a tough spot on those conversations, but it's an exciting time. We have, you know, currently we have a government that really wants to push the envelope and be first on things, so it's an exciting time. So, yeah.
Is there a state level advisory board made up of private sector and government to address transportation?
So our state transportation board is made up of 7 members. It's the governor, lieutenant governor, state controller, and then 4 public members that are meant to represent a broad range of interests. They're all private sector people, but they're appointed by the governor.
Yeah, I think that really lacks vision. On the, you know, what I'm thinking of is more in terms of, I mean, you know, look at what we're doing as a state in terms of trying to meet our workforce development efforts, right?
Right.
So you have the Governor's Workforce Development Board, which is that higher level bureaucratic piece, and then you have the sector councils, which are very specific, very nimble, you know, very specific representation from the private sector. So to your point about the idea of where do we get that input from the tech side, from you know, in terms of trying to push innovation through this process.
No, I think that's a great idea. We're currently looking at that state transportation technical advisory committee and looking at not just what their roles are, but also the membership. So there's an opportunity there. We do have a freight advisory committee that is made up of a lot of private industry on the freight side, but that's, you know, kind of one sector. And then we work closely with the Governor's Office of Economic Development, which brings in a lot of private sector. But I think there's probably a better connection to be made there.
Unfortunately, we tend to see that most of these committees are made up of folks who are really looking at self-preservation. I mean, look at what's happened on the transportation side with having the, you know, talking about the Uber conversation, right? It was always represented by taxi. So I think, I guess I'm curious in terms of from a national perspective, when you're looking at where things are headed from a multimodal perspective or from a mass transit perspective, do you think, does there seem to be more, I mean, obviously the infrastructure, you know, you talk to most big cities and they say the only way that mass transit really works is if it's rail-based. But the cost associated with that is ridiculous, right? So the idea that now with these emerging technologies, do we see more potential for adaptation and integration because it's using our current transportation system, so the cost to implement is really very minimal from the jurisdictional level?
Right. I think there's a great opportunity for, and this is just Sandra talking. I think there's a great opportunity for enhanced bus rapid transit. So which if you do the full implementation of it with dedicated lanes and signal preemption and all of that, can act very much like rail-based transport, but have that flexibility that if demands change, you can move the route. The challenge there, from what I've heard on the development side, is that light rail investment spurs a lot more development because you've made that commitment in that infrastructure and you're not going to move it. So that's where businesses and residents want to locate. I think Raymond wanted to add to that.
Can we get Brian come up after this last one? Yeah, I don't want to miss Brian.
Yeah.
I just wanted to tack on a couple points to the question. First of all, to Garrett's earlier point, I think there's still a role for transit in the future because of transit's ability to move a lot of people more efficiently than in vehicles, single occupancy vehicles or even autonomous vehicles where the occupancy rate might be 4 people at max. Whereas a bus or light rail can carry 60 plus people in a vehicle. And so Garrett's example of the strip is a good one where you have a ton of people that want to move up and down a specified corridor, and some sort of transit option I think is always going to be a viable conveyance of people. The other thing is, as efficiencies in operation are obtained through autonomy that apply to vehicles, they would also apply arguably to transit, so that if a vehicle operates autonomously, in theory a transit vehicle could operate autonomously and then bring down operating costs from a transit perspective. Thus, the economies that you gain through autonomy can also be realized at the transit level. The other and I think Sandra's last point was apropos too, is a lot of what we've seen in a lot of our neighboring communities, especially Phoenix, Denver, Salt Lake, there's the economic development potential that a lot of the land use side really likes to see for the permanence of some sort of investment. Now, whether that still holds true in the future, I think that that dynamic may change, but historically up till now, that's why a lot of transit-oriented development and investment has gone in along rail corridors, because it represents a long-term investment to transportation that won't change or deviate off of a route. The last plug I'll make, just so you all are aware, is we hope to kick off a high-capacity transit study sometime in the near future. We definitely want to have that study address the effects of technology on the future high-capacity transit network. And our approach is going to be very much looking at the different types of transit technologies, whether that's bus rapid transit, whether that's light rail, whether that's modern streetcar, as well as the adjacent land uses, right? Because it's really the densities that support different types of transportation, whether that's single occupancy vehicle all the way up through light rail. And so you have to achieve certain densities in order to support different types of transportation. And this study is going to look at those two things holistically, that land use and transportation connection. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We don't have anyone under contract yet, but hopefully by the beginning of the year, we'll start that process off, and there'll be several opportunities for public engagement.
Right. Quick insights. Long ago in a land far away, which we'll call Las Vegas for lack of a better name, when we were talking about expanding the bus rapid transit, two things came to light. People would phone us from around the country, and I got a lot of those phone calls, probably a dozen, and multiple times talking with them back and forth. Are you going to have stations on your BRT? And will it be a separate right-of-way? If you've got the right-of-way, you're okay. You can do all sorts of different up and down the scale of additional ridership. And having a station at that location, people were willing to talk about transit-friendly development and actually doing developments around those locations. So it's not as good as rail for reduced development, but it can be good. If you look at Ottawa, for instance. Thank you.
Okay. So, into your time a little bit, Ryan?
Yeah, we're going to work on the minutes maybe.
Thank you.
No problem. This has been good conversations and real quick. My name is Ryan Wheeler. I work for the Nevada Department of Transportation as a project manager, and and I was invited here to give a report on 2 projects that are currently underway in southern Nevada, and are the 2 largest projects that the department is undertaking at this time. And that is Project Neon at about $560 million as the contract award, and then also I-11, which combined between the 2 phases of construction of I-11 is about about $350 million. So combined about $900 million. So I prepared way too many slides for the next 15 minutes that I have, so please excuse me if I brush through some of them quickly. So Project Neon on the planning side has been 20 years in the making, and we broke ground earlier this year, this spring. There's Governor Sandoval there at that grand opening for that groundbreaking that we had, and getting this project and all the planning work for the last 20 years to the point where we're being affected by construction. So, hallelujah, right? Project Neon, the main focus area is from Sahara to the Spaghetti Bowl. The HOV portion of the project will connect the HOV that currently exists on 95, and will run HOV through the Spaghetti Bowl south all the way to Silverado Branch. So that will, after this project, there'll be 22 contiguous miles of HOV in southern Nevada, so we're pretty excited about that. The need, I don't know that we really need to discuss this. If you've driven it once or twice, you know that there is a need. All right? But 3.25 accidents per day, that's one of those metrics that we look at to determine projects. The delivery method has changed a couple times from DesignBuild to the P3 method, and we really looked at that because we received an unsolicited offer to construct this project according to P3, which is design, build, finance, and maintain. And so we entertained that for about a year, and then looked at P3 construction versus design build, and decided to go back to design build procurement. Our partners for this project is and funding is the majority of it is through NDOT bonding. The City of Las Vegas has contributed some money, about $53 million for local improvements. And then we also have FHWA that's contributing money to this project as well. The project costs, what's interesting to me here is you look at, it's not working, but the right-of-way cost is $270 million, and the construction cost is almost $600 million. And so we're about half, and that's interesting to me, and also for future planning, that is, as we grow and as our system and freeways need to get a little bit wider, right-of-way is a major component of the cost center. So design build versus P3. The reason why we decided to go design build, here's a few items for you, is the market demand for bonds and competitive pricing made bonding more affordable than we originally projected. The right-of-way acquisition potential effect on the schedule. Design build, we have more control of that. P3, there was a lot of risk by the contractors there. The P3 teams were concerned about appropriation risk and requested progress payments, and that put the department in a position that we weren't comfortable paying in advance a certain allotment, not knowing if they were, going to perform. And there was some risk associated with that. The project can be completed within a similar time frame by bonding as P3, resulting in no realized efficient savings. And then one thing that was a big concern for NDOT was under P3, how well they would do with the operation and maintenance of the project once it was completed for the next 20 to 30 years, versus NDOT being able to operate and maintain that facility. So those are some of the reasons we went to design build, and this presentation is, we kind of put it together with the planning aspect in mind, and less on the construction side. Here's the 2 time frames that we looked at between P3 delivery schedule and design build delivery schedule. You see on P3, the RFP was a little bit earlier, the preferred proposed or selected was a little bit earlier, just slightly. Construction started close to the same time frame, a few months apart, but completion was about the same, so there was no real great benefit of going T3 versus DesignBuild from a schedule perspective. Right of way we discussed, this is Project Neon here, and all the green areas are properties that we've already acquired, and we have some ongoing properties right now that we're acquiring or condemning to make this project occur. The design-build team is Hewitt, and Atkins is their designer. And here's a brief construction schedule. Design and demolition has been taking place so far with some minor construction. From most of 2017, they're going to build the local street network, and I'll show you a schematic of that. And then in 2018, that's when we're allowing them to go in and impact I-15. So they can't really go and close any lanes on I-15 for a long duration until 2018, and we try to minimize that time frame to lessen the impact of the traveling public. And then the last part of the project will be the HOV flyover connection through the spaghetti bowl. So here's the first phase, and those are the local streets that are all being worked on. You can see the majority of the work is offline. We do have some work on 95. We told the contractor that you cannot work on 95 and I-15 at the same time. So in 2017, you'll see that work on 95. In 2018, you'll switch to the I-15. We have some great new connections that we're making that are going to be great for the project. There's a currently Grand Central Parkway tees into Charleston. Now that will continue through south and connect to industrial as well as western. So we're excited about that additional connection. The Charleston interchange is going to be redone completely to make all that ramp weaving as you come on or off of the Charleston interchange better. And then we also add a southbound on from Pinto, right there where the new medical district is going to be. Here's the next phase in 2018. It's all the I-15 work, and then in 2019 they'll finish the HOV connector over there at the Spaghetti Bowl, and then finish the minor work on local streets. So project benefits, improve safety and air quality, reduce congestion and travel delays, creating jobs, better surface street connection to downtown area, and we talked about the HOV connection. The HOV flyover, there's some project elements, Charleston interchange redone, so it'll be more of a typical interchange with your ramps coming on and off. You'll have I-15 southbound ramp grading, which will eliminate that bad merge for southbound I-15, where those are trying to merge onto Charleston and 95 trying to merge onto I-15. That'll be taken care of. New connections and an active traffic management system. We're going to beautify the downtown area through that. I'll skip through this communication. If you basically search Google for Project Neon, you'll be able to find us real quick. It's n.projectneon.com. We are sending emails out to all those, weekly emails to all those that are interested in the project. And we're also on Twitter and Facebook and use local media. So we do a pretty good job of trying to perform outreach. We also have a local PIO office there at our project office just south of Folsom Lofts. So that's, let's see. Since we are into the details, I'll just, and most of you drive the area, we'll inform you of one major impact coming up. Here at the end of October, we're going to close the MLK off-ramp. And so in order to do that, we're actually to fly over the north I-15 northbound to US 95 northbound. We're going to close that 2-lane ramp for 120 days. So be ready for that. That's when everybody will know Project Neon is going on for sure, right?
Now that one ramp's already closed, so yeah. That's
Yeah.
on the ramp. Okay.
Yeah. So that's going to happen here at the end of October. Get on our website and learn about it. Here's what we're sending out to those. You see the I-15 North to US 95 North will be closed. We're going to reroute them on that green structure, which is normally the MLK off-ramp, but instead of getting off at MLK, we're going to bring you right back on 95. But that bridge today is 2 lanes, and that detour will be 1 lane. Right. And we provide some different alternatives to handle that. Because of that, though, we also are closing the I-15 southbound to US 95 northbound, and so we have a detour for that. And then also 95 north and MLK north, we closed that. So be prepared if you use that route on potentially trying to take an alternate route for those 120 days. So there's a Waze, we use Waze. I know RTC promotes Waze. It's a great app. How many of you use Waze? Excellent, excellent. It's a great app to figure out travel times. It's operated by user input, and so if you come across a crash, they input the data. It's also utilized by RTC and NDOT's project managers and their data that's input into the system. So it's really a real-time system of your fastest route. So that's questions on Project Neon. Do you have any questions on Project Neon? Go ahead.
What was originally, I guess is now supposed to still be a future phase, the connection, the braiding of the ramps from northbound 15 to northbound 95. Has there been any discussion about what the likely timeline is for that? It's obviously not part of this portion of Project Neon, but are we looking at 5 years in the future or 20 years in the future somewhere? Do you have any idea?
From our planning perspective, I believe we're looking at about 20 years in the future, but based on that decision matrix that Sandra talked about regarding politics and funding, that could be accelerated or put off.
You mentioned earlier that this planning started 20 years ago, right? Back then, I came in here in Vegas like 5 years ago. Back then, some people already had a vision that something like this will impact the corridor. I mean, the spaghetti bowl back then, or it was just a future vision for them. I mean, the traffic congestion at the spaghetti bowl interchanges, was it happening before? Was it impacted 20 years ago?
So that's a great question. I believe that we ran a study at that time showing what the projections would be. And I had a slide up here earlier that the current capacity of the spaghetti bowl was, I think, 150,000 cars per day. I'd have to look at the slide again. But currently, there are about 270,000 cars per day. And so our design is accommodating not only for that, but for the next 20 years as well.
I think we knew it was going to get worse. I don't think we knew the extent to how quickly Las Vegas was going to grow. So.
And then you have to struggle with the budget, right?
Right.
Yeah, those are things like the alien things that Jared talked about earlier. You bring in a Raider stadium, and how does that accelerate population growth, which adjusts our normal 2 or 3% that we put on our projected planning documents.
So the downturn was probably a good thing.
From NDOT's perspective, to catch up, yes.
Well,
So,
from a planning perspective, because it, in theory, gave us some time to plan and not just react. I don't know that was the case, because a lot of local agencies reduced their planning staff.
So we're kind of out of time. I don't know if I should go through all of I-11. In fact, how about we just open it up to questions? If you have questions on I-11, I'll answer those. And outside of that, you can contact me separately, and I'll answer any questions regarding I-11. Just real quick, I-11's combined about a $350 million project. It's 15 miles of new freeway that's going around Boulder City, where the meeting was at yesterday. And I assume most of you are familiar with the project. We anticipate that it will be complete, both phases, by mid to late 2018. And so, a great project, well underway. A lot of planning went into this one, dating back really to 2002, and even before that with the Hoover Dam bypass, and probably even before that with connecting 2 major metropolitan areas by a freeway, which currently doesn't, it's US 93. But now it will be a freeway. And we're excited from the department's perspective that this project, this 15 miles, even though we're planning for many more miles, it will be the first one that will actually be signed Interstate 11. And FHWA has provided that designation. Sandra's been working on the I-11 study through the rest of the state as it goes north. And so the department, I'm excited working for the DOT to say, we're building a new freeway. It's not too many states that are doing that, so that's exciting. But any questions on I-11?
Just a real quick comment.
Yeah.
The mayor was very apropos when he said yesterday he doesn't want to be up Radiator Springs. So we'll see how that works out for him.
Yeah, we'll see. We know that they're already talking about putting an interchange in Buchanan.
Okay.
There's a bridge there being built there. There's ramps being built there, but they're not, as part of this project, they're not paving it, but we think that they likely will soon.
Okay, so that's good for them. Okay.
Is there a timeframe for the planning to the rest of the state?
Well, that's a tougher question. So we completed, about a year ago, we completed the bi-state study that went all the way from Nogales to northern Nevada and beyond. The challenge there is, again, I talked about this being reactive versus planning for the future. There's so many needs right now that we're sort of keeping that, going. We're going to assess some kind of identifying some sizable next steps through the statewide long-range plan. We're looking at starting to scope the segment from basically leave Las Vegas to approximately Tonopah, because that section doesn't have a lot of alternatives. So the approach there is do something like what Arizona is doing from the state line south, which is widened to 4 lanes divided, and then sort of as the demand increases, start looking at access control and things like that. From Tonopah north, there's still several alternatives. So we're just kind of keeping that on sort of the planning burner and trying to chip away at it little by little. But there's so many, current demands like Project Neon, like, we also need to do it. We're currently working on a traffic study for Southern Nevada, looking at the whole freeway system. So I-11 is a piece of that as well in terms of what does the system as a whole need. So our planning study got a little bit sideways with some of the jurisdictions in terms of one alternative versus another. But we really needed to take a step back and say, what does the system need and what is I-11's role in that? So that's ongoing right now. So it's going to be kind of a gradual, we're going to be working on it for several decades, I think, to be honest.
Okay, Garrett.
I think we're out of time. Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Sure.